one of the main things that I'm interested in is trying to corroborate what we have in animals and looking at that in humans, because one of my biggest issues is that in animals we found a lot of incredibly interesting things that seem to alleviate tinnitus in animals, and then when they've gone into human studies, they've not shown the greatest amount of success. And that might be due to, heterogeneity in people with tinnitus, or it could also be to do with the actual animal models themselves. So I think if we can actually learn from that and kind of move those into humans, there's several different reasons that an objective test would be interesting. First, to corroborate the animal models, and then also then as outcome measures when we're testing certain treatments and understanding why certain treatments work for some people and they don't for others. And really, a lot of people have spoken, and it's really encouraging nowadays that people are focusing on the heterogeneity of tinnitus. So trying to understand that and understanding, okay, what factors mean that you'll benefit from a treatment, which ones don't, and using objective tests is one way of looking into that, really. I think, so Dr. Will Sedley has just spoken to, has got some very interesting studies that use some of his predictive coding hypotheses of tinnitus and implement that. So I think those are very encouraging. They're still at the early days of testing on larger populations. I think myself, we can learn really from what we've already done in animals. If we're trying to then take that to humans, then there's a very common test, the gap detection test in animals, I should say. And when we've gone and taken that into humans, the results are somewhat more variable. But I think, and this is work really from Sylvia Berger's group, finding that there are a lot of different factors that we need to account for and understand just on the basics of these tests before we can then go, okay, now we've got an objective test for tinnitus. But yeah, I think there's brilliant minds at play in terms of trying to figure out how we might develop an objective test for tinnitus and what parameters we need to sort of refine. And again, if I channel my friend Rich Tyler in Iowa, he really focuses on, we've got to then also think of the individual. And so any objective test for tinnitus, I think also has to kind of optimize for any individual. And in animals, we generally will do that. We'll optimize our test for the animal model we're using and look on a specific individual basis. And I think we need to think about that with people with tinnitus, because that's what we need to go towards, is trying to understand how sometimes people can be benefited from treatments and sometimes they can't. And so I think individuals is the best way to go for me. I think that's an absolutely brilliant question. I think it's one we still don't actually know the reasons to. So again, not to plow on about it, but heterogeneity I think could be a big issue. People are very different, and there's a lot of different factors that, for tinnitus, for instance, go into someone's tinnitus experience. And I don't think we necessarily capture that too well in animals. So again, when it comes to animals, we're just starting to go towards, say, animal models of distress in tinnitus as well. And I think that it can go two ways, and it should go two ways, that if we're doing animal research, then we should be able to then take that into humans, because if we can't, then there's no point doing it. And if we're doing the human research, we should then be able to learn something from that, take it back to the animals and say, okay, we're seeing this heterogeneity in humans, for instance, with, say, distress. Let's go and model that in our animals and then try and better understand why certain treatments might work or under what conditions. And as I say, I think really that doesn't give us the answer to that. Why are these tests failing necessarily? We don't know currently. And so I think we need to really narrow down that translation from animals to humans to really get something more reliable, because as you say, we've had a lot of promising results in animals, and you can do an animal study and go, yeah, I've cured my animal's tinnitus, but if you can't take that into humans, then it's pretty meaningless. I've been fascinated. I think it's been really interesting. The Young Investigator Symposium with Dr. Sedley and Dr. Coops was fascinating. I think Dr. Coops was speaking in terms of the separation of hyperacusis and tinnitus, and I think she'll speak to you about that. And I think that's really fundamentally fascinating. There was some work from SIU sort of looking at novel possible drugs for tinnitus and taking from other fields that we've done before, like chronic pain. And so, yeah, it's really encouraging and promising to see that a lot of people are trying to solve this difficult problem. So I think I'm hopeful, and I think the other thing that was really beneficial of the Young Investigator Symposium was that everyone's sort of trying to crack the sort of established theories that aren't necessarily working and trying to think, okay, let's think about this in different ways. And that's encouraging.